Okay, so to conclude our synth, pluck, and lead layering section, I want to leave you with a few tips, 5 in total. And we learned quite a lot during this module, and I did cover quite a lot of things that you may not remember or that I didn't cover in detail. So I just want to give you these tips to go away with that you can use when it comes to your own experiments and your own practice. So the first one is to not neglect source material. And I know I've said this throughout the course and you must be getting sick of it by now, but layering starts with the source material that you use, and some sounds just aren't going to work together no matter how much you EQ or process them. So when it comes to layering plucks, synths, and leads, try to avoid settling for something that just fits. Even if it takes you 10 minutes to find the right preset or 10 minutes to tweak that synth patch that just isn't seeming to work, then it's all worth it. Basically because it will save you time. It will sound a lot better in the long run. Again, EQ and compression and all those effects are really enhancement effects, that is making the sounds fit better, but if they don't fit in the first place, they're never going to fit at all. So tip number 1, don't neglect source material. I cannot say that enough. Tip number 2 is to listen for what could be rather than what is, and this may be a little bit controversial or a little bit opposed to that first tip, but don't just scroll through presets with sort of a yes-no mindset, a black and white mindset. This is going to work, this isn't going to work. When looking for sounds to layer, you should try to think creatively about how they could fit, even if they don't while you're scrolling through them. For example, you might be looking for a pluck to layer with an existing one, and you come across a preset that has a really nice transient or a really nice delay sound to it, but you think, oh, well, it doesn't fit. It just doesn't sound right. But, with a bit of process and a bit of EQ and a bit of tweaking, it could actually sound really good with your initial layer. So, again, think about what could be rather than what is. Now, I'm not saying settle for layers that don't sound good or presets that don't sound good, but rather don't neglect presets at first sight or first listen based on how they sound initially. Tip number 3 is to tweak presets first, and I think I've already said this, but you should be tweaking in terms of synthesis and sound design before processing with EQ and other effects, whether it's the filter envelope or the inbuilt reverb on the synth. Tweaking presets before moving towards EQ and other processing effects is absolutely essential. Number 4. Be wary of effects clashing. Now, I talked about this in, I think it was the second lead video, where I disabled the delay and reverb on one of the patches. Now, if you're using ready-made presets from a sound set like ours, then it's important to work out whether you need the effects enabled or not. If you've got multiple layers, you probably don't need delay and reverb on every single one. Because at the end of the day, it's just going to clash and it's just going to cause muddiness and it's just going to sound messy. So keep in mind this with inbuilt effects, and also when you're adding effects externally, as it's easy to get carried away. The 5th and final tip is to leave room for other elements. And while it's tempting to add multiple layers and create, the biggest synth sound or the biggest super saw, it's not very practical and functional because you've still got to leave room for everything else in your track. And that typically includes, the bass, the drums, and in some cases even vocals, which makes it 10 times harder. So don't go overboard. Lay it in context with everything else, not in isolation. So again, that concludes our synth section. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found something valuable in it. If you have any questions, of course, leave a comment. Otherwise, we'll be moving on to layering bass and looking at how it's different to layering synths and plucks and so on. So I'll see you then.